You're watching WNGE-TV Channel 2, Nashville.
ABC's regular program schedule will not be seen today. Instead, we bring you this live ABC News special.
Son of Illinois, man of Hollywood, Governor of California, Ronald Wilson Reagan, today to become President of the United States.
From Washington, this is an ABC News special. Live coverage of the ceremonies marking the inauguration of Ronald Reagan. At the ABC News anchor booth on Capitol Hill, Frank Reynolds.
Good morning from Washington City. Tuesday, January 20th, a mild, beautiful day in the Capitol with plenty of sunshine now. And in less than 2 hours, Ronald Wilson Reagan will speak the 35 words prescribed by the Constitution of the United States and will become the 40th President of the United States. As President-elect, Governor Reagan will walk through a doorway in the west front of the Capitol building. You see it here. This is the first time in the history of this country that this side of the Capitol will be the scene of a presidential inauguration. He will walk down across the red carpet to what is now officially termed the President's platform. And after watching the swearing in of the Vice President, Governor Reagan will step forward to place his hand on the Bible and keep, in the words of his first political hero, Franklin Roosevelt, his own rendezvous with destiny. But that is still more than an hour and a half away, and as you are undoubtedly aware, there have been some late-breaking and very welcome developments in the hostage crisis, and for an updated report on the very latest on that situation, we're going to go to our colleague correspondent, Ted Koppel. Ted?
Frank, it is a beautiful day here in Washington in more ways than one. The President, Jimmy Carter, is still waiting at the White House. He has been up all night. He is waiting now for the definitive word that the hostages have left the ground in Tehran. That has not yet happened. As soon as it does, he will take the air live. He will make an address to the nation from the White House. As soon as that happens, of course, we will come back live, as indeed we will all day long, interspersed between your coverage of the inauguration. It looks as though they're coming home, and it looks as though it's just minutes, not even hours away. Frank?
Thank you, Ted. And what an incredibly dramatic day this is. What an historic day. Not merely the inauguration of a president and the beginning of a new administration, but the end of this long, traumatic ordeal that the United States has been suffering for so long. Well, the festivities up here will not really get underway for some time yet. There are still only a few people here, really. Some photographers, naturally, and plenty of security people around the president's platform, and a few folks gathered out in the stands, the vista just below us here. What a magnificent sight it is the president-elect will have as he gazes down there, taking the oath of office, and then delivers his inaugural address. Let's go back across town right now, down from Capitol Hill, across the slightly more than a mile to where Pierre L'Enfant, the Frenchman who laid out this Capitol, we start from the Capitol, decided that another high knob of ground would be just the right place for the president's house to be connected with the Capitol by Pennsylvania Avenue. And there is the north portico of the beautiful old building that will be Ronald Reagan's home this afternoon. Just across the street, another house painted white. It is Blair House. And from there, you see it there, the president-elect will be escorted over to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and is meeting with the man he will replace, President Jimmy Carter. Just up the street from Blair House, our ABC News anchor booth in Lafayette Park, overlooking the White House and the presidential reviewing stand, and Barbara Walters. Good morning, Barbara.
And good morning to you, Frank. The president has been blessed today with the most beautiful weather. It's like a spring day. And he went this morning, we already caught a glimpse of it, to receive blessings. He went to church just a short time ago and just around the corner from where we are here. He went to St. John's Church, which is an Episcopal church. The president describes himself as a Christian, and that's it. There was a brief 20-minute service, and the president was surrounded by friends. His kitchen cabinet was there, his family, the vice president and Mrs. Bush. Frank Sinatra went there this morning. James Stewart went there. The service was conducted by the rector of St. John's Church, by Ronald Reagan's pastor from the Bel Air Presbyterian Church, and as a special invited Reverend, Billy Graham. And Bill Greenwood at Blair House can tell us more about the president's elect this morning.
Barbara, the president came back from Blair House from the church, I should say, to Blair House about 5 minutes ago. He was in a very buoyant mood, said he thoroughly enjoyed the service, and was asked about the hostage situation. Mr. Reagan said that he had talked with President Carter early this morning, that President Carter had informed him that the money transfer had been made, but he has not apparently talked to Mr. Carter recently. So there is no confirmation that the hostages are moving, no confirmation from Mr. Reagan at least. He will, however, go from here, Blair House, across the street to the White House for the traditional courtesy call at 10:30, just a few minutes from now. And what happens in Iran is certain to dominate the mood of that meeting between Ronald Reagan and the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. Back to you.
Well, Ronald Reagan had a very gala night last night. President Carter had a long and difficult night. And we're going to hear about the president's night and his day, what he's been doing all morning, in just a moment. Our coverage of Inauguration 81 will continue in a moment.
ABC News live coverage of Inauguration 81 is being brought to you by General Foods, family of fine products, pleasing you and your family for over 50 years. Products like Maxwell House, both cereals and Kool-Aid Mix. And by the American Gas Association and your gas company. Clean, efficient gas energy. Gas, the future belongs to the efficient. And by Polaroid, makers of Time Zero Super Color Film with dazzling color and clarity that will astonish you.
Joan, I think I just sold the well sculpture.
Wonderful. Have some coffee. Whoa, only half a cup. Don't you like my coffee?
Love the rich taste. It's the caffeine I could do without.
You happen to be drinking Brim decaffeinated coffee.
This is Brim?
This is freeze-dried Brim, and it's decaffeinated, so you don't have to stop at half a cup.
If it tastes this rich, I don't want to stop. Fill it to the rim.
With Brim?
Fill your cup to the rim with rich-tasting Brim, ground or freeze-dried.
So what does a butcher do on his day off? Has a barbecue.
Hi, Uncle Pete. You coming outside to fix barbecue chicken?
Nope, I'm gonna fix it in the oven with shake and bake coating mix, barbecue style. The coating turns into tangy, tomatoey barbecue sauce.
That's neat, Uncle Pete. Yeah, it tastes like more. Yeah.
That's my recipe for a bang-up barbecue. Chicken, shake and bake barbecue style, and friends. One for pork, too.
Where we are right now, right behind us, you can see the reviewing stand. This is where President, because he will be president by then, Ronald Reagan will come to watch what's being described as a short, snappy one-hour parade. And right behind there, the White House. And at the White House is still, of course, President Carter, because he still is president. And he's been maintaining a vigil, hearing about the hostages, and we're going to hear about the president's night and morning right now from Susan King, who's at the North Portico of the White House. Susan?
Yes, Barbara, it really is official. Just during the commercial, the red carpet was rolled out here on the front steps of the North Portico. It is a very strange sensation here at the White House this morning, as I'm sure you can well imagine. The cars are lined up in the driveway, ready for the transition of power, and yet in the press room, the vigil does go on. About an hour ago, there was a report that President Carter had put his makeup on, and reporters are waiting for just every moment, that moment when he will come down and announce that the hostages are really moving. The report is that he has learned that the hostages are moving in Iran. So Iran is dominating the morning here, even though this is the official morning of the inauguration. As has been reported during the evening, President Carter remained in the Oval Office all night, napping. He did not spend his last night in the White House sleeping. Vice President Mondale was also with him. He was invited to the White House to spend the last night in the Lincoln bedroom, but he too was in the Oval Office taking a nap on the couch here. And so there is a real moment of anticipation and the feeling that perhaps there will be a last moment for Jimmy Carter to make that announcement, to make the major news of the day. But we're still waiting. Back to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Susan. And so everything is in a state of change. It's interesting, when the president-elect becomes president, during that period of the swearing in, all of the different office numbers at the White House change except one, the press office. Susan just mentioned the press office. Everybody else gets new telephone numbers. At the Capitol now, back to Frank.
Thank you, Barbara. And I noticed that Susan said that Iran is dominating the atmosphere there at the White House. It is up here, too, on Capitol Hill. I don't know how many times as I came in this morning, being stopped at various security checkpoints, which is the normal order of things. Everybody was asking, what have you heard about the hostages? What's the latest? Have you heard anything new? And that seemed to be what everybody was primarily interested in, even though they're all gathered up here to witness another great historic event, the inauguration of the President of the United States. I want to introduce now two of my colleagues who are going to be with us here in the anchor booth at the Capitol, ABC News correspondent Sander Van Oker and George Will, the syndicated columnist and Pulitzer Prize winner, and I must say a card-carrying conservative who has longed for this day for some time. George, you must be very, very pleased.
Well, it is pleasing, and I think it's particularly pleasing to have this hostage crisis come as a kind of punctuation to the ending presidency and clearing the plate for the new presidency. And in a way, perhaps Ronald Reagan is unusually blessed in the sense that most men have to wait a while for their first achievement. An argument can be made that he's had his first achievement with presidential power before he got presidential power, that it was the anticipation of his somewhat sterner position, as revealed in his description of the Iranians as barbarians, that may have helped break the logjam here and bring the hostages home.
Well, there has to be some reason why they, too, were obviously in such a great hurry to get this thing done and have it finished before Reagan actually placed his hand down and assumed the authority and the power of the presidency. Sander, it strikes me that it is a marvelously civil way to handle this whole thing. Here is the new president is going to ask, and has asked, the outgoing president to go to Germany to greet the hostages. There's a touch of class about this whole operation, you know?
Frank, what's returned to American politics, and I don't think that any man has brought so much to bear on it as Ronald Reagan has, is the politics of civility. If you recall, just 8 years ago, 10 years ago, the poisonous, venomous strain that was in our political system. And President Carter graciously acknowledged to President Ford during that ceremony in '76 how much Jerry Ford had contributed to it. I think that's one of the things that's overlooked in our body politic, and in this authenticating experience, this experience of legitimacy, which very few nations have.
Yes.
England, the passing on of power, not like they do in the Soviet Union or in China. Ronald Reagan has done this in a very civil way.
Sandy and George, we're going to come back to you frequently throughout the morning. But right now, for the latest on Iran, I want to go to my colleague Ted Koppel, who's back at our ABC News Bureau. Ted?
Thank you, Frank. What's happening right now is that quite literally, and it's probably a matter of minutes, the president, that is still Jimmy Carter, is waiting at the White House for final word from Tehran that the hostages have not only boarded the plane, but that the plane is airborne. And what we'd like to do now is to go to another one of our colleagues, Peter Jennings, who's standing by at our European anchor desk in Frankfurt, West Germany, to get the very latest from Europe. Peter?
Ted, just to make the point at the outset that in this atmosphere of mistrust between the United States and Tehran, the timing of the release of the American hostages is critical, involving messages passed back and forth, as it has been for so many months now, to the Algerians. But as of the moment, we do not know very much from Tehran. We do hear from the control tower and from the duty officer at Tehran Airport that the two Algerian 727s are still on the ground. They have not moved. There is no absolute confirmation that the hostages are at the airport. It is getting late in the day, somewhat reminiscent of yesterday. It is now dark in Tehran. It's a difficult airport to take off from after dark, but there's a full moon there tonight, and depending on weather, it would not necessarily be a problem. Here in Frankfurt at the Rhine-Main Air Force Base, there is a very good indication that nothing has happened. The C-9 Medivac aircraft, the Nightingales, have not moved from here, and they are not going to move, we are told, until after those Algerian 727s have cleared Iranian airspace. So basically, for the moment, situation unchanged. Ted?
Thank you, Peter. Standing by now at the White House, where President Carter has quite literally been up all night with several of his closest advisors, including his old friend and lawyer Charles Curbo and Hamilton Jordan, is our White House correspondent Sam Donaldson. Sam, can you bring us up to date on what's happening at the White House?
Chicken is cooking, and Curbo said, well, it hasn't flown yet.
Sam, let me interrupt for a moment, because we didn't hear you at the top. We've been having some microphone problem with you, but we are hearing you now. Can you pick it up from the top again, please? What is happening at the White House? All right. Our apologies. You must understand this is a day when we have remotes not only all over the country, but quite literally all over the world. Some of these technical problems will be happening during the day. The president is ready to come and make an address to the nation as soon as he hears that the hostages are airborne. That, at the moment, is believed to be not even a matter of hours anymore, but a matter of minutes. Frank?
And we certainly will be waiting for that word, Ted. Thank you very much. Well, our coverage of the hostage situation, the welcome break in the hostage crisis, and our coverage of Inauguration 81 will continue in a moment.
It's everywhere, deep underground, under the ocean, in tight rock formations, in coal, in waste, even in plants. It's methane. You know it as natural gas. Clean, remarkably efficient gas energy can come from many sources, which is why gas can continue to be America's #1 domestic energy source in the future. But it still makes sense to use all energies wisely today.
I just didn't wake up one day and switch to Tylenol from aspirin. 4 years ago, I was given Tylenol for a headache. It really worked. Then I heard something that impressed me even more. It turns out Tylenol is the pain reliever hospitals use most. And if hospitals trust Tylenol, I can feel better about using it at home for my family.
For relief you can trust. Trust Tylenol. Hospitals do. And now the Tylenol family has a new regular strength capsule.
Back here at the Capitol, and in a little more than an hour, the actual ceremonies will get underway here on the West Front when the various VIPs and nabobs arrive to commence the ceremonies here that will culminate in the inauguration of the 40th President of the United States. That distinguished gentleman is still down at Blair House, just across the street from the White House, and we're going to go back now to our Lafayette Park anchor booth and Barbara Walters. Barbara?
Yes, Frank. Any moment now, the escorts to take the president-elect and the vice president-elect over to meet the president are going to show up. The president and the president-elect just don't go to the Capitol by themselves or with their wives. They have escorts from the House and the Senate, and we're waiting to see them. One of the moments of suspense is to see Ronald Reagan in his morning dress, a matter of great controversy in the press. But we hear that underneath that morning dress, or perhaps even lining the coat, is a bulletproof sheet of material, because there have been great security precautions taken right behind us. When you see the booth where the president will watch the parade, that's bulletproof glass. And to tell us more about the security arrangements that have had to be made in these times, here is Ann Compton.
Not when the job of the U.S. Secret Service is to expect the unexpected. Some preparations are routine. Rehearsal drives down the inaugural parade route, the new president's heavily armored Lincoln Continental, followed by bulletproof limos for a virtual army of Secret Service agents. Most of the strategic planning, however, is deep inside the Secret Service itself, checking a large number of threats received against Ronald Reagan's safety. So much has changed from those early days of the Republic when presidents walked easily amid the inauguration crowds. By Lincoln's time, the nation was poised for civil war, and the military was ordered to set up artillery to keep the peace. Even into the 20th century, tradition demanded that presidents such as Woodrow Wilson ride in full view of their constituents on Inauguration Day. But John F. Kennedy was the last president to ride in an open car. In the 2 decades since his assassination, presidents have ridden in closed cars, as Mr. Reagan will today. Of course, Jimmy Carter made himself an exception with a surprise walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. But it was no surprise to the Secret Service, which had been warned 3 weeks in advance. It is said that Washington, D.C. police are still angry that the walk was kept secret from them. But when a president insists on being exposed to danger, it is the Secret Service which is the first line of defense, and the number of agents is increased dramatically. They are trained to shoot, but only when the threat is obvious, trained to physically block any attack, and trained to get the protectee out of the area. No one will say whether the new president will take advantage of lightweight bulletproof linings available these days even for formal wear. But agents say Mr. Reagan has already proven to be more cooperative with security than President Carter was. And agents are also said to enjoy an easier rapport with him, which has begun to worry service officials in Washington who say dangers increase when agents get too comfortable, too familiar. Now more than ever, the unexpected will be part of President Reagan's life. This is Ann Compton.
I don't know whether you can... Yes, you can. Right behind us, if you can take a look, you will see the security men and also a beautiful German shepherd who just visited us shortly. There he is. He was a little more alert. He came into our booth, and it is his job to sniff around and see if there are any bombs. There were, we are thankful to say, none. We were told we couldn't pet him. They don't want us to get too friendly because this is a dog whose job it is to make sure that presidents are safe, and he shouldn't get too friendly with the folks. So in the midst of all the festivities, the rather frightening aspects of the security. Back to Frank now at the Capitol.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, of course, there is the great hope that none of those security measures will have to come into effect today. The president-elect is still in Blair House. Some of the folks have begun to gather here at the Capitol and on the platform. The Marine Band is beginning to warm up a bit. The Marine Band has been playing here ever since the inauguration of James Monroe, not on this side of the Capitol, but they've been providing the official music for the occasion. Now, we understand that President Carter, whom had been reported earlier, was preparing to speak to the nation and, in fact, did have that intention, has now decided that he will not, at least for the moment, he will not deliver an address to the country on the morning of his successor's inauguration, at least not right now, because we can't really be very certain about anything in view of the late-breaking hostage developments. But it is probable that Mr. Carter will not wish to speak and say the deed is done until the hostages are aboard an Air Algerian plane and are out of Iranian airspace. Only then, after this long trauma, can we really be secure in the knowledge that the ordeal, this disaster really, has finally come to an end. How ironic, gentlemen, Sander Van Oker and George Will, that it should happen this way.
Well, it's like a script, Frank, a drama of some kind. The Jimmy Carter and the Iranian situation should come, in a sense, to a climax exactly at the same time. He leaves office, they leave Iran, and without in any way mitigating the joy that we all feel about the fact they're being released and the joy we feel about this inaugural day as a celebration of our national unity. Fact is, Iran has been a humiliation for this country for the last 14 months.
And it has played such an important role in American politics, too. It undoubtedly has contributed to what is going to happen up here today. It was only, after all, let's say, last year at this time, Jimmy Carter was at the heights of his popularity. Remember how his popularity just shot up to the stratosphere after the hostages were seized and the country naturally rallied round the president, as it is wont to do in a time of crisis. And Ted Kennedy just went down like that. Carter went through the primaries, was able to secure the nomination. But then eventually, Iran became a symbol of, what did you say, George? National impotence or
national
inability?
Decline. One of the most interesting facts to be broken out of the polling on the volatile switching of opinions in the last few hours of the campaign was that the one question you asked that showed the bottom falling out of support was, is America still respected in the world? There was an enormous change that alone could account for the widening of Reagan's lead in the final hours. Another thing about this that is so appropriate, Frank, in a grim and melancholy way, is that it is hard to suppress, and no reason to suppress, the suspicion that this is just the final episode of Iran manipulating the United States through television and all the electronic media of the world. They have, clearly they seem to have timed this perfectly to rain a bit on the American parade.
Yes. And to think that it would happen in this way, it is very, very difficult to, not to believe that they really have planned. Despite the fact that their reputation for planning and efficiency is hardly estimable, it's difficult to escape the conclusion that they have set it up this way just in an attempt to overshadow this joyous scene here today, this national renewal, and also to demonstrate their contempt for, as they call him, the Great Satan Carter, who will now be, I guess, replaced by the Great Satan Reagan.
Well, Frank, the Soviet Union did the same thing on Saturday as a final shot at President Carter, whom they don't like, and his national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, an absolutely outrageous, scurrilous
commentary in Pravda about the release of the hostages being tied in with our sinister ambitions in the Persian Gulf. It was a slap at Carter. This is a slap at Carter. And I agree totally with George. Our reputation in the world as a result of this has been severely diminished.
Yes, well, how fortunate, though, that it comes at a time, finally now, when there is a change in administrations, and the new man can start off with, as you indicated before, more or less of a clean slate without that terrible burden, the need to do something about Iran hanging over him. Well, we'll have more on Iran, on the breaking developments in the hostage crisis, and, of course, our coverage of the Inauguration 81 after this message and a word from our local stations.
To a changing world, Granada brings an efficient engine, rack and pinion steering, advanced suspension, the 81 Ford Granada. Size, smaller. Mileage, best in its history. Quality, designed with Ford's commitment to quality. During assembly, no less than 38 inspectors examine every single car. The new Granada.
Now, 12% annual percentage rate financing at your participating Ford dealer.
What do you think EIK means?
Eat-in kitchen?
Oh, look, here's one. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, economical gas heat.
Hey, circle that one.
When people look for a home today, they look for efficiency. Gas heats more homes efficiently than any other energy system. It heats water, cooks meals, and dries clothes efficiently. And new energy-saving gas appliances use less fuel than ever. Gas. The future belongs to the efficient.
Wednesday on 8 is Enough, Joni falls in love with her boss and Nancy becomes a celebrity.
Shop our January sale and clearance, and you'll find selected groups of furniture reduced from 20 to 44% at John F. Lawhon's.
In city after city, we ask people to take the Pepsi challenge and let their taste decide.
I want you to tell me what you picked, okay? Pepsi. Pepsi. Pepsi.
Pepsi. PepsiCo.
Pepsi.
In tests like these, nationwide, more people prefer Pepsi over Coca-Cola.
Pepsi is more flavor to it. I'm going to tell my friends Pepsi is the best.
Let your taste decide. Take the Pepsi challenge.
Hey there, you there, we know what you can't say no to.
Something for nothing, right? How about free Coke in the only glass big enough for the Godfather? Stop in, order one of my incredible pizzas, and for 99 cents more, I'll give you one of these capacious glasses filled with Coke. Bring it back and we'll fill it up free for a year every time you order one of my medium or large pizzas. Hey, but these glasses can't last forever.
The pizza you can't refuse.
Get it.
This is WNGE TV2 Nashville.
ABC News live coverage of Inauguration 81 continues.
The two threads of the story continue, the hostage story and the inauguration, as the government goes on this inauguration day. There's been some activity just in the few moments that we left you. The Vice President-elect is already in the White House, having been greeted by the Vice President. The Vice President-elect, George Bush, and his wife were accompanied by Senator Howard Baker and by Representative Robert Michael, because each of the participants today will have their escorts, the escorts having been chosen by the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. He chose the escorts from the House and Senate leadership, Republicans with the Republicans and Democrats with the Democrats. And then the next thing that we are hoping to see, and it should happen any moment, is Blair House, where the President-elect will emerge with his First Lady-to-be, and they will be accompanied by Senator Mark Hatfield, who is the chairman of the Joint Congressional Inaugural Committee, and by the former Minority Leader, Representative John Rhodes. And then they're all going to meet in the Blue Room of the White House, supposedly to have coffee and small talk. It would, one would imagine that today it would be more than small talk. Perhaps President Carter and President-elect Reagan will discuss the hostage situation. They've been talking primarily the last hours through their aides. And so we have this kind of strange schizophrenic story of the hostages, and yet at the same time there's a very gala and opulent celebration that's taken place. And last night, while the president was Anxiously waiting word of the hostages, the president-elect was at a big celebration, a gala with all his friends, and he and Mrs. Reagan sitting, some people said almost as if they were on a throne, watching the wonderful excitement and watching Rich Little make fun of them.
Governor Reagan, you have said that you are going to raise defense spending, cut taxes, balance the budget all at the same time. How do you propose to do this?
Well, it's very, very simple. I'm going to keep 2 sets of books.
Do you have any animosity towards President Carter?
Well, no. You know, I didn't mind when Jimmy left me inflation, when he left me unemployment, when he left me a recession. But I sure hope he's coming back for Billy and Miss Lily, and they're still sitting in the Oval Office right now saying, what the hell happened?
Somebody said there was something like 100,000 extra people came to Washington for this wonderful event. I was at the airport when I came in at Dulles. A fellow came up to me wearing a long flowing robe. He was chanting, handed me a flower. I said, Governor Brown, what are you doing here? Being president has to be the toughest job in the world. You don't get much time before the critics descend on you. As you know, tomorrow the president-elect will take the oath of office at 10 o'clock in the morning. And by 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, Ted Kennedy will be saying, ask yourself, are you better off now than you were when Ronald Reagan first took the oath of office?
Made a small mistake. The president-elect does not take the oath at 10. He takes it at noon. And now we go to Bill Greenwood at Blair House to see what is going on with Ronald Reagan.
Barbara, we expect the president-elect to leave Blair House just seconds from now. Our cameras are focused on the front door. There's a great deal of expectation, anticipation in front of Blair House. We see now the White House, the man who will become White House press secretary coming out. And we expect that the Reagan family will leave, get into the limousine any moment now. We are told that the family is moving through the building on their way to the limousine. They'll drive across the street to the White House for the traditional meeting with the Carter family. A meeting that may be a little bit more gloomy since apparently there has been no final resolution of the hostage crisis, which Mr. Carter had hoped to be able to consummate before the Reagans drove across the street. When they get across the street, there'll be coffee and tea, and Sam Donaldson, my colleague, is over there now, so Sam, we'll throw it to you.
Well, Bill, here at the White House briefing room, things are emptying out. The Iranians seem to have cheated Jimmy Carter of his great moment here at the very end, to the very end. He was poised to come out here and announce at last that the hostages had been released and had flown from Iran, but apparently it hasn't happened, so he's not going to make that announcement. Even should it happen now, he will not come here. Bill?
Coming out. Sam, we see flashbulbs popping in the foyer here at Blair House, and that has got to mean that the Reagan family is entering the door, and there they are. Nancy Reagan, the lady who at noon today will be the next First Lady of America, President-elect. Any late word, Mr. And you saw Mr. Reagan shake his head when asked if there was any late word for him on the hostage situation. Inside his limousine now with John Rhodes and Senator Mark Hatfield. They are the chairman of the inaugural committee. They will accompany the Reagans to the White House, attending that little coffee klatch across the street as President Carter and President-elect Reagan share a few final moments before they then travel to Capitol Hill for the swearing in and the transfer of power. Black limousine now pulling away from Blair House, followed by, of course, the Secret Service, who will be a permanent fixture in the Reagan family for the rest of their lives, since all presidents in office and out are guarded. A U-turn here on Pennsylvania Avenue, moving now very, very slowly toward the White House, the motorcade in front of the Executive Office building, moving the final block very slowly toward the building in which Ronald Reagan will make home for at least 4 years.
One of the interesting things is that 4 years ago, when he had to take this trip, Jimmy Carter walked. And now the Reagans in limousines. We also got a glimpse of that morning outfit, and since Frank Reynolds has refused to do the fashion notes today, I will be doing it. So we saw the inauguration morning dress, the Oxford gray jacket, and the striped trousers, which we understand cost $1,250 to be made for the president-elect. Mrs. Reagan looking very smart indeed, in a kind of orangey red, Adolfo, a Cuban-born designer who does a great many outfits for Mrs. Reagan. Coat and dress and hat all matching, and we were told that that cost about $1,700. I mention these prices because there's been so much controversy about the clothes and should the Reagans dress up, but this is somewhat the theme of the Reagans, which is success and the good life. And they're not ashamed of looking well and feeling good and showing what the free enterprise system works, I guess, if that is one of their themes. We have Susan King now with more.
Yes, as you can probably see, there is President Carter right now, and Mrs. Carter, who just threw a kiss to one of her staff members. They're standing on the steps here of the portico as the cars of the Reagans now come up. There was a smile on Mr. Carter's lips this morning, although I'm sure it is one that comes a bit harder. He is smiling now as the car does pull up. Mrs. Carter looks relaxed and not too tired. They're here, of course, to greet President-elect Mr. Reagan. They are now shaking hands. One thing that eases this moment, yesterday morning at breakfast, Mr. Reagan said to his aides, if Mr. Carter is not going to be able to get to Germany, if it doesn't end by noon, why don't I offer him an airplane so that he can go over? He could become my special envoy. At that moment, I'm told, he walked from the breakfast table and called Mr. Carter directly, and he accepted about 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. As you can see, the new couple not saying too much at this point, but smiling for the photographers. Any momentous moment, comment right now?
Well, I think President-elect his wife will enjoy the
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
As I posed for photographers, President Carter said that he thought that the president-elect and his new wife will enjoy their new home, as I'm sure they will. All morning they've been preparing the White House for their arrival. It looks pretty clean around here. It was very empty, however, just a few aides waiting for this moment. What they'll be doing while they are here is having some coffee and chatting. Back to you, Barbara.
Susan, one more fashion note. Mrs. Carter wearing a spice-colored wool suit, and she'll be wearing a coat over it, which she bought off the rack, she said, and it's by an American designer, L.A. Wax. Rather bittersweet moment, the greeting of the new from the old. We will be back. Our coverage of Inauguration 81 will continue in a moment.
Is sinus driving you crazy with pressure, congestion, mean sinus headache? Want more than aspirin or cold capsules? Take a U-turn to Sinutab, extra strength Sinutab, with the most sinus headache pain reliever per dose without a prescription. 54% more per tablet than standard sinus remedies. Helps relieve pressure and congestion too. Take a turn to relief, a U-turn to extra strength Sinutab, the #1 selling extra strength sinus pain reliever.
In 10 seconds, you can begin to see why taking pictures with Polaroid's Time Zero film is more fun than just taking pictures.
Here comes that smile you won't forget. Here comes that look you had to get. Here comes that super color right now.
Put new Time Zero Super Color in your Polaroid camera and get the world's fastest developing color pictures.
Here comes another Polaroid smile.
What are you waiting for?
Back once again at our Capitol anchor booth overlooking the President's platform, where Ronald Reagan will take the oath of office to become the 40th President of the United States. A little more than an hour and 15 minutes or so away from that point right now. And that means that, of course, the hostage crisis has to be settled, really has to be settled in terms of the hostages being aboard a plane and out of Iranian airspace before a new administration takes over. And while I haven't said all bets are off, Ronald Reagan certainly would be free to adopt an independent course. It would not be bound to carry on with the process of negotiation that has brought us right to the edge of the release. Well, at any rate, that probably is not what is going to happen. We trust and we have every reason to believe that the hostages will be out, but it's agonizingly close now to the moment of transition of power in the United States. For the latest on the hostage crisis, we're going to go back to our colleague Ted Koppel. Ted?
Frank, this is really an incredible international fugue that is playing itself out here, even as the two presidents, the incumbent and the president-elect, are sipping coffee at the White House. Both of them must be on tenterhooks. Over in Iran, events are moving apace. In fact, there is at least one wire service report that some of the American hostages have already boarded one of those Algerian aircraft standing on the runway in Tehran. We'd like to bring you up to date now on the very latest from our European desk. Here's my colleague Peter Jennings in Frankfurt. Peter?
Well, Ted, I will not at this point be able to go as far as saying that we know that they are boarding the aircraft, but we do know that the hostages are now, at least some of them, at the VIP lounge at Mehrabat Airport. We got through to that VIP lounge just a short while ago. The foreign press has been barred from the lounge, but PARS, the official Iranian news agency, is presently inside the lounge interviewing some of the hostages. This is a similar pattern to that which occurred when the first hostages were allowed out on November the 18th in 1979. We've also had another important phone call just a few minutes ago to an aide in the office of Mr. Azizi, Ahmed Azizi, who is in the Prime Minister's office, who has been one of the chief negotiators, and he has explained to us that about 1 hour from now, that would be about 11:45, Washington and Eastern Standard Time, Mr. Nabavi, Behzad Nabavi, who is the chief hostage negotiator, and Azizi will go on to Iranian television and explain to the Iranian people everything about the hostages. The aide then went on to tell us that everything, his words, is set to go. I guess you can see the hostages very soon. There is no problem. Everything is set up. I then hasten to add that the C-9 aircraft here, which are very much a signal to us here in Frankfurt as to the fact that the hostages are off the ground, remain at their stands at Rhein-Main Air Force Base. They will not leave until the Algerian 727s have left Iranian airspace. But I think we can very much from here, Ted, agree with you that there is a new pace of momentum on this 444th day of absolute frustration.
Peter, I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask you. First of all, is it your impression that they will not be released or that the plane won't take off until after this announcement has been made in Tehran?
Well, I suppose, Ted, that depends to some extent on your political cynicism. There is certainly a feeling among some of us that in Tehran there's a very heightened consciousness about when President Carter becomes ex-President Carter and Ronald Reagan is actually inaugurated. But I'm inclined to think that stick it to Mr. Carter attitude once again is not the prevailing one. I think if what we're hearing today is correct, we're talking about logistics problems, we're talking about the immediacy of signals from the Algerians that everything is now in place. But I think there is a very good chance that 1 hour from now is simply going to make it absolutely clear that the hostages will not have left by the time Ronald Reagan is inaugurated.
It's not out of the question, though, is it, that they're quite literally, that someone over here is watching television and is on the phone with Tehran and saying, hold it another 30 minutes, he's still president?
I think that is utterly and totally conceivable. You and I both know, Ted, in the last 444 days plus, particularly those of us who have been in Iran, say, oh, my brother-in-law saw you on television in Los Angeles last night. There is a constant monitoring of the Western reporting of Iran. The heart of it, I've always thought, was Los Angeles.
All right, Peter, thank you very much. We'll be coming back to you, obviously, during the day as this thing evolves. We'd like to switch now to the State Department, where our diplomatic correspondent Barry Dunsmore is standing by. Barry, that has been kind of the hotbed of pessimism over there at the State Department. I take it this morning that is no longer the case.
No, I think that everyone really believes that this time it finally has happened. I would make a point to what you and Peter were discussing, however, that there certainly is cynicism here as to Iran's motives, and certainly there are lots of people who believe that that plane will not take off until Ronald Reagan takes the oath of office. As a matter of fact, even 2 days ago, I was told by someone in this building very late at night that they were sure that this would finally happen, the hostages would get out, but the Iranians would deliberately close Jimmy Carter's window. A word about the general mood here. I think it's probably best described as one of exhaustion. There are people here who literally haven't been in a bed or 2 or 3 days. I'm told that up on the 7th floor, where the real action is, that people are finally beginning to relax now. They're not popping champagne, but I think probably there may be a Bloody Mary or two floating around. Ted?
Thank you, Barry. And of course, there is exhaustion also. There must be at the White House, where President Carter has been up all this past night, and he didn't get an awful lot of sleep last night either. We will continue to bring you up to date on developments in the evolving Iranian hostage story. But for the moment, let's go back to Frank Reynolds on Capitol Hill. Frank?
Thank you, Ted. Yes, what a difference between not merely the physical, but the emotional state of the president and the president-elect on this day. Well, some of the people now are beginning to move through the rotunda, the great rotunda of the Capitol building, one of the most impressive rooms in this city and in this nation, for that matter. And our correspondent, James Wooten, is there now. Jim, I noticed before, in glancing at some of them, there is not complete uniformity in dress. Are there some rebels down there?
I haven't been taking a poll as the members of Congress troop by behind me. But I'd say that only about 1/3 of them are wearing the formal dress dictated by the president-elect. Most of them, nevertheless, are in a rather happy mood as they move past me here. This rotunda is the centerpiece of American history, as you mentioned. Today it becomes an avenue for the members of Congress, the members of the diplomatic corps, as they move from the east front of the Capitol through the rotunda out onto to the presidential stand. Just a few moments ago, we had a troop of another kind going from north to south through the rotunda. Members of the president-elect cabinet, General Haig, Mr. Reagan, Mr. Watt, the secretary-designate of the Interior, and members of the president-elect staff, all looking very sharp and snappy in their morning coats. They're not the sort of folks who are going to defy that clothing demand.
Yes, Jim, there is a difference in independence, isn't there? Whether you work for the executive branch and you are under the direct control of the president, and whether you work for the Congress. Somebody once said that on Capitol Hill there are two kinds of people, no matter whether you have a string of degrees. If you're not elected, you're just a clerk. And if you are elected, you're a king. I think that was Charlie Rangel of New York who made that comment. Well, our coverage of Inauguration 81 continues in a moment.
What do you think EIK means?
Eat-in kitchen?
Oh, look, here's one. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, economical gas heat.
Hey, circle that one.
You know,
when people look for a home today, they look for efficiency. Gas heats more homes efficiently than any other energy system. It heats water, cooks meals, and dries clothes efficiently. And new energy-saving gas appliances use less fuel than ever. Gas. The future belongs to the efficient.
Plie and up, releve and Tang.
I'm proud of her, practicing every morning. Is Tang always in the routine? Usually.
Kids need vitamin C every day.
But Joni's so healthy.
Still, her body can't store all the vitamin C she needs. But each glass of Tang has a full day's supply.
Tastes great.
She loves that fresh orange taste. Joni, what are you doing?
The tango.
Tang instant breakfast drink, because we all need vitamin C every day.
Behind us, the White House, in the White House, the President-elect, the President and First Lady-elect, sitting in the blue room of the White House. In recent weeks, Nancy Reagan has been getting some blasts from the press saying that she wants to redecorate the White House. One report said she was going to tear down a wall in the Lincoln Room. And we wondered just how much can a First Lady do? We know she can redecorate the private rooms. What about the public rooms? And so we asked an expert to be with us, the chief usher of the White House. He said it's like being a hotel manager. He was the chief usher under Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, Mr. J.B. West. And we thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
So, suppose Mrs. Reagan says, look, I don't like the blue room. I want it pink. Can she change it?
No question about it. She can if she... now there is a committee on the preservation of the White House, but they are appointed by the president, and so that all she has to do is to get people that go along with her. It's a matter of money maybe than anything else, you know, to do it with.
Suppose she wanted to change something like the Lincoln Room. And by the way, we should say that we spoke to her press secretary, and Mrs. Reagan has no such plans to redecorate the public rooms. But suppose that a First Lady wanted to. I don't like it. You know.
Mrs. Kennedy came in and changed the whole thing.
Could you tear down a wall? Could you do that?
Well, hardly that. I mean, that would be a little difficult.
But you could
Except
redecorate.
that you could. I mean, if you you'd have to go to Congress to get the authority to tear down walls, or like Mr. Truman, of course, put on the balcony, which there was a lot of trouble about that, but the Fine Arts Commission said that he couldn't do it, so he fired all the Fine Arts Commission and got a group that could. So it's as simple as that.
So Mrs. Reagan could if she wanted to, but she
Right.
doesn't seem to want to. I understand she gets $50,000 to redecorate the private quarters.
That's right.
Sounds like a lot of money. Maybe
Well,
these days it
it's
isn't.
been that way before, but usually it used to also include painting, but of course it doesn't that anymore. I mean, with inflation and so forth. But there's always been the $50,000 appropriation for a new people coming in, which includes, at the time it included dishes and that type of thing too, but I'm sure now it doesn't.
Mrs. Reagan has her own decorator she was
Right.
brought from California. The moving business somehow makes a great many of us feel a little sad for whoever the inhabitant of the White House is. What happens? Does everything go out and the president has an overnight bag, or how far in advance do they move everything?
Well, actually, of course, the White House is completely furnished, and they don't have to move out furniture unless they have brought in furniture of their own, which is done early, I mean, way ahead of time, of course. As far as other things are concerned, the only thing they have to bring on Inauguration Day are their clothes. I mean, it's like living in a hotel the first night until they decide which rooms they want to live in. So.
So it's not too much, it's just the
It's
personal
not really.
things.
I mean, it's just personal things, mainly on the first day, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. West. I'll bet you're glad you're not involved with it now. You can just come and watch.
Great.
And by the way, we understand that President-elect and Mrs. Reagan have brought a good deal of their furniture here, and that one of the things that they're bringing, it probably will be reported, so I will say it here, is that they are bringing their own king-size bed. Now we go to more serious news to Frank at the Capitol.
Well, I don't know that it's any more serious, Barbara. My goodness. Some of the people, well, quite a few have already gathered here. There are varying degrees of very important persons at a ceremony like this. The truly big shots are up on the platform there with the President, members of the House and Senate, and various other types like that. And then down below on the slope of the Capitol are the invited guests. They have to have tickets. They didn't pay for those tickets, but at least they didn't buy the tickets. Now, they may well have made a campaign contribution. Who knows? Heaven forfend. They have some reason for being here. But beyond them, and you have to have tickets to be in a seat or even in a standing area this side of the pond. Let's go down there now if we can, and we'll show you the ice skating pond where people were skating until a day or so ago. Maybe it's thawed a bit too much now. Beyond that pond, however, as our camera moves down, guess who's allowed in there? Just ordinary people, citizens of the United States, who have come to see their president inaugurated. They don't have to have a ticket, I guess. And Charlie Gibson is down there with, I believe, a young man who has made a rather extraordinary effort to get here. Charlie?
Well, Frank, these are not just the little shots. It's almost as small as BBs down here. If you don't have a ticket to anything, if you haven't been invited anywhere, this is what you see. That's your view of the Capitol. You are ways away, and you don't wear morning suits down here. Backpacks and binoculars are really what you need. Actually, some people have climbed a tree over here. If we can come around, it's a leaning room only up there in the tree, and that's probably about as good a view as you can get up here. We did find one gentleman here who brought a high school class all the way from San Bernardino, California, Glenn Taylor, who brought his kids out here. You came a long way for not much of a view. Can you see anything from here?
Well, with my binoculars, I hope to be able to see. Otherwise, I can just tell there are people up there.
Knowing that you wouldn't be very close, knowing that you didn't have a ticket, it's a silly question, but why'd you come?
It's exciting to be here, and we're proud that we're from the state that has produced this particular president, and we brought the sunshine that you're enjoying.
Indeed, you brought him good weather. And do you have some of your class back here? Do you have some of your class back here? All right. That is the class of the Queen. That is the class of the Queen's English down here in the cheap seats, Frank.
Charlie, do you see the sign that they were holding up now playing Bonzo Goes to Washington?
Bonzo has come, and so has the English class from San Bernardino.
And Ronald Reagan is not at all defensive about that movie in which he co-starred with an ape or a chimp. He said actually it was a pretty good movie, but it's certainly been the subject of a great deal of fun. Well, our coverage of Inauguration 81 will continue after this from our local stations.
This is ABC in Nashville, WMGE TV2.
The makers of Robitussin cough medicine ask, do you know which kind of cough medicine is right for your kind of cough? For instance, do you need an expectorant, with a cough suppressant, with a decongestant, or a combination of all of these? Because there are different kinds of coughs, only one of these Robitussin formulas may be right for your kind of cough. So don't let just our television commercial recommend your cough medicine. The makers of Robitussin ask you to ask your doctor or pharmacist.
Good tasting, good for you Chungking. No artificial flavors or colors. No preservatives.
Try Chungking for your beautiful body. Try Chungking for your beautiful body. Try Chungking for your beautiful body. Try Chungking for the beautiful taste.
Crisp, crunchy vegetables. Delicate deep water shrimp. Tender chicken. Good tastes from the good earth. Chungking. Good food.
Try Chungking for your beautiful life.
Fresh canned peaches, sir?
Hold the rest.
You beans!
Let's skip dessert.
MASH, weekdays at 5 on TV2.
You're watching WNGE TV2, Nashville.
ABC News live coverage of Inauguration 81 continues.
The Carters and the Reagans, the Mondales and the Bushes are still in the White House preparing to leave and make the drive up to Capitol Hill. We understand that they probably have the news that Ted Koppel is going to give you right now about the hostage crisis. Ted?
Very good news indeed, but still a little bit uncertain. Apparently one of those two Algerian medevac planes has taken off from Mehrabad Airport in Tehran. For the very latest on what's happening over there, let's go once again to our European desk and Peter Jennings. Peter?
So we do not know if the 52 American hostages are on board that, but the runway lights are still on at Tehran Airport, and at the end of one of those runways is another of the Algerian 727. Again, we do not know that the 52 are on board, but the assumption is considerable and not difficult to make. For in the VIP lounge, where the hostages have been for the last while, are the chief Iranian negotiator, Behzad Nabavi, the representative from the Prime Minister's office, Ahmed Azizi, the Swiss ambassador, Eric Lang, and part of the Algerian delegation. So that is certainly the most positive news we've had already, that the 727 has taken off. With or without the hostages, we are not yet sure, but the runway lights at Tehran Airport are on, and the other aircraft is in a position to take off within a matter of minutes. We do not know. Ted?
Thank you, Peter. Well, of course, as this fragmentary information comes in, and as soon as we can make that fragmentary information a little more solid, we will, of course, bring it to you, and we'll do that immediately. Now back to Frank Reynolds on Capitol Hill. Frank?
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Peter, too. And how tremendous it is that it is happening, if it is happening, just about within the hour when the administration changes hands. The parties down at the White House now are about to come out, so we're going to go back to our Lafayette Park anchor booth overlooking the White House and Barbara Walters. Barbara?
Well, Frank, we understand that they're about 4 minutes away from coming out, and then it will be the final moments of his presidency for Jimmy Carter and the moment that Ronald Reagan has been waiting for. Ronald Reagan, by the way, has been given 100 tickets for the swearing in, so he can't invite everybody, just his closest friends and family. We will continue with our coverage of Inauguration 81 in a moment after this message and a word from our local stations.
You're looking at the best dandruff shampoo money can buy because it's been clinically proven best. Testing at a major medical school proved it works faster, gives more complete dandruff control than any leading dandruff shampoo. It's Selsun Blue, the only leading shampoo with the anti-dandruff ingredient doctors prescribe most. No other brand has it. Try Selsun Blue. It simply works best.
Running this ski lodge is a family affair. We've all got our jobs to do. And when one of us gets a cold or flu,
I have to take this up to Daddy. Okay.
the rest of us do worry.
Here, he'll like this.
But we've got our Bayer. For aches, sore throat pain, and fever, nothing we can buy beats Bayer. For us, it's rest, fluids, and Bayer aspirin, the only pain reliever our family uses.
Morning.
Dad, look at you.
For your family's aches, pains, and fever, all you need is Bayer.
Friday, when they said football was a man's game, they didn't count on the Oklahoma City Dolls.
Sylvia, I want my money back.
I ordered the low cholesterol special, and cheese is not low in cholesterol.
It's not cheese. It's New Age sandwich slices, the new cheese substitute, made with vegetable oil.
Sure tastes like cheese.
New Age has 90% less cholesterol and 75% less saturated fat.
A delicious part of my diet to fight cholesterol.
Still want your money back?
Who, me?
New Age in 4 delicious flavors. It sure tastes like cheese.
With a lot less cholesterol.
The Pepsi Challenge in New York.
I chose Pepsi.
Detroit.
The Pepsi.
Flint.
Pepsi-Cola.
Grand Rapids.
Pepsi.
New Orleans.
Pepsi-Cola.
Dallas.
Pepsi.
San Antonio.
Pepsi.
Houston.
Pepsi.
Los Angeles.
Pepsi-Cola.
Corpus Christi.
Pepsi.
It's a fact. Nationwide, more people prefer Pepsi over Coca-Cola.
It's got more of a to it.
Let your taste decide. Take the Pepsi Challenge.
You're watching WNGE TV Channel 2, Nashville.
ABC News live coverage of Inauguration 81 continues. This portion brought to you by Ford and your local Ford dealer, who invites you to test drive the new 1981 Ford cars and trucks, including Escort, the new World Car from Ford, the World Car Company.
We're back here at the White House, where any moment the president and president-elect will come out. Jimmy Carter will be riding with Ronald Reagan and Rosalind Carter with Nancy Reagan. And here they are at the White House, Susan King.
Yes, as you see, Mr. Mondale and President-elect George Bush have just walked down the stairs. Their wives came out just a few minutes earlier. They will be riding up in a separate car. The vice president and the vice president-elect will be riding in their car. You know, they had juice and coffee and pastries, but it looked like there were a lot of picture-taking going on in the green room, where they've all been waiting the last 20 minutes, along with the principals, of course, with the 2 members who have organized this inauguration, Charles Wick and Ed Gray. They're Mr. Reagan's co-chairman of this most impressive inauguration.